All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible, most human stories ever told, the life of King David. You've got this shepherd boy who becomes a giant slayer, a warrior, a poet, and a king who pulls a whole nation together. But on the other hand, he's also a man with some deep, really tragic flaws. It's this amazing story of incredible power and just as incredible weakness. So where do we start? Well, maybe not where you'd expect. We don't begin with a crown or a victory. We begin with these words. Words of just gut-wrenching grief, spoken by David himself. This is how he reacts to hearing about the death of his rival, King Saul. And this line, man, it's a line that's going to haunt his own story. So picture this. Israel is a total mess. The kingdom is fractured. Its leadership is just gone. King Saul and his son Jonathan, who is also David's best friend, have both been killed in a major battle. This leaves a huge power vacuum. It's a kingdom in crisis. Now, when the guy who brings David the news shows up, he's probably expecting a big reward. Hey, your enemy is dead. But David's reaction? It's not what you'd expect. He doesn't see this as his big chance. Instead, he and his men, they tear their clothes, they fast, they mourn. He even writes this beautiful, powerful song of sorrow for the king who tried to kill him and the friend he loved. And this one line right here tells you so much about the man. Before we ever see David as this brilliant general or a shrewd politician, we see him as a guy with this incredible capacity for loyalty and love. It shows you this deep emotional core that, as we'll see, ends up being both his greatest strength and his greatest source of pain. Okay, so it's from this place of loss that David starts his climb to the top. And it's not a quick jump. It's a careful, calculated journey to bring a totally divided nation together under one throne. See, unifying Israel wasn't as simple as just taking over. First, his own tribe, the tribe of Judah, makes him their king down in the city of Hebron. But the rest of the tribes up north? They stick with Saul's house, rallying around his last surviving son. And what comes next is a long, ugly civil war that just drags on for 7.5 years. And this really shows you the dynamic of that war. It was like a slow-motion power shift. The scripture says it perfectly. David's side in the south just kept getting stronger and stronger, while Saul's house in the north got weaker and weaker, until the whole thing just fell apart. So once the war is finally over and all the tribes agree he's the one, David makes an absolutely brilliant move. Instead of ruling from his home base in the south, he conquers this little city called Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem didn't belong to any of the tribes. It was neutral ground. By making it his new capital, the town of David, he creates a brand new center of power, loyal only to him. It was the perfect way to unite the north and the south. With the kingdom united and secure, David does something huge. He brings the Ark of the Covenant, which for the Israelites was the literal symbol of God's presence, into his new capital. This is it. This is David at the absolute top of his game. He's powerful, he's successful, and it seems like he can do no wrong. And right at this high point, he receives this incredible promise from God. David wants to build a magnificent temple, a house for God. But instead, the prophet Nathan comes to him and says, nope, God's going to build you a house, a dynasty. This is the Davidic covenant. It's a promise that his family line, his throne, will last forever. And this idea becomes a bedrock for the entire nation. But, and this is a huge but, it's right here at the absolute zenith of his power, with this divine promise in his back pocket, that David makes a choice that will start to unravel everything. This is where the triumph turns into tragedy. The story starts so simply. It's spring, the time when kings go to war. But where's King David? He's not with his army. He's chilling at the palace. Now, that's not just a random detail. It tells you everything. He's a leader who's become detached. And from his rooftop, he abuses that power. He sees something he wants, and he decides he's just going to take it. And what starts as an abuse of power quickly spirals into something much, much darker. When Bathsheba sends a message, "I'm pregnant," David goes into cover-up mode. His first plan is cynical. Get her husband, Uriah, back from the war and hope nature takes its course. But Uriah, it turns out, is a man of incredible honor. He refuses to go home to his wife while his buddies are still out there fighting. So when that plan fails, David escalates from deception to cold-blooded murder, sending Uriah back to the battle carrying his own death sentence. For a while, it looks like he got away with it. But then the prophet Nathan shows up at the palace. And he doesn't just accuse the king. No, he's smarter than that. He tells David a story about a rich guy who steals a poor man's only beloved lamb. And David, the man who still sees himself as a champion of justice, absolutely explodes with rage. He declares that the man in the story deserves to die. And then Nathan springs the trap. In one of the most electric, dramatic moments you'll ever read, he points his finger at the most powerful man in the nation and says, You are that man. Boom. The story wasn't about a lamb. It was about David and Uriah and Bathsheba. The king has just passed judgment on himself. And here's the sentence. David committed his sin using the sword. He used the war to murder Uriah. And so his punishment will be this sword, not from foreign invaders, no. The violence will come from inside his own house. It's a curse of bloodshed that will stalk his family for the rest of his life. And that terrible prophecy, well, it finds its most heartbreaking fulfillment in the one person David may have loved the most, his handsome, charismatic, and dangerously ambitious son, Absalom. For years, Absalom plays the part of the perfect populist prince. He hangs out at the city gate where people come to get their legal cases heard. He listens to their problems, shakes his head, and says things like, it's a shame there's no one from the king to hear you. If I were in charge. He's basically running a long, brilliant smear campaign against his own dad, and slowly, methodically, he steals the loyalty of the nation. And then the unthinkable happens. The coup is fast, and it's devastatingly effective. Absalom goes to Hebron, the very place David was first made king, and has himself declared the new king. The conspiracy is so huge that David has no choice but to grab his loyal followers and run for his life. The great unifier of Israel is now a fugitive, kicked out of his own city by his own son. The curse is coming true in the worst way possible. Well, this all leads to exactly what was prophesied, a sword in David's own house, a brutal, bloody civil war. The final battle is a national catastrophe. 20,000 men die. In the end, David's veteran commanders outsmart Absalom's army, and the rebellion is crushed. But this is no victory for David. There's no celebration, no relief. The king who once wept for his rival Saul now has to face a grief that is just infinitely deeper. The price of keeping his kingdom was the life of his own son. When the messengers come back from the battle, David's first and only question is the young man Absalom safe? When he gets the answer, he is utterly shattered. The kingdom is saved, sure, but the king is broken. And his victory speech is replaced by the wail of a heartbroken father, a cry that echoes that first lament for Jonathan. But this one is filled with a whole new world of agony. So what do we do with a figure like this? A hero or a villain? A saint or a sinner? He's the man who built a nation and received this eternal promise from God. He's also the man whose sins unleashed unimaginable tragedy on the people he loved most. His story just forces you to ask, how should we remember our leaders? For the incredible things they build, or for the terrible ways they fail? It's a question that's just as powerful now as it was 3,000 years ago.